grab your cup. Someone sent me a message recently asking about generational trauma or generational wounding. If you've never heard that phrase before, you might be able to figure out what it is, but it really refers to, I think there's two pieces of it. It refers to painful things that get passed from one generation to another, like painful experiences that get passed down. And it also refers to specific ways of coping with those things or with life in general that get passed down. And so what ends up happening is we get born into a particular family, and there's a lot of ways that we learn to be and experiences that we didn't even have ourselves, but are still causing problems in our lives, because what's happening is we're passing down the wounding. We're not passing down the wisdom that is possible if you acknowledge and heal the wounding. So if you do that, then there's a whole resource of wisdom and change that's available. But most of the time we're passing down the wounding. So let me give you a couple of examples. So I'm German background, and I think culturally Germans and some other different groups of people can be very stoic, really unaccustomed to and uncomfortable with their emotions, uncomfortable with processing emotions, expressing emotions, acknowledging them, all of the things. So in my house growing up, it was, very much keep a stiff upper lip, get through it, just figure it out. I'll give you something to cry about if you need something to cry about, but that's not something that's worth crying over. That kind of thing. And so that right there, because human beings are designed to have emotions. Human beings of all the species, that's one of the things that sets us apart, and is part of the human experience, is to have all these different array of emotions. And when we are taught we're not going to deal with that, don't look at that, there's wounding there, because it's saying don't look at an entire quarter of you. If you looked at mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual as the parts of you, or even if you just want to do, mind, body, spirit, but the emotions are linked in with the spirit. But it's a whole part of us that, for many people, generational wounding has said, don't acknowledge that, don't deal with it. And then people have a fear around certain emotions. I don't want to be angry. It's not ladylike to be angry. That's generational wounding if you've gotten that message. It's not ladylike to be angry. Because now you have to decide every moment, am I going to be a good lady, or am I actually going to feel and express this anger about something that's not happening? So that's one example of generational wounding. Another example might be you grew up in a family where it has become a way of teaching and a way of guiding is to shame someone. So shaming people for their accomplishments or lack of accomplishments, shaming people about who they are or what they're feeling. What's wrong with you? Oh, come on. That's so stupid. Why are you worried about that? That makes people feel shame. Shaming is common in some ways of disciplining people, right? So if that was part of your upbringing and you got that from your parents, and then when you're a parent, you're doing the same thing. It's passing down the wounding. Shaming is very wounding. Shaming is a form of trauma because it tells us who we are is not good enough. It tells us that there's a problem in our being. That's what shame is. So shaming might be another example of generational wounding that gets passed down. Another example, those are both like what causes the wounds, but also coping gets passed down. So you might have grown up in a family where we don't talk about stuff. We shove it under the rug. We're just going to keep moving on. So the way of coping, not only is the wounding like not acknowledging our own personal emotions and expressing them, but how we cope within our household, within the culture of the household is we don't talk about that. It's avoidant. It's avoidant. Or you might have parents who were avoidant in a lot of ways, and avoidant with sharing their emotions, and avoidant with talking about things, and avoidant with making other people feel safe, avoidant in anything that felt uncomfortable. And so now that's how you feel and are a lot of times. So that's passing down wounding around certain coping strategies. So generational wounding exists for all of us. I don't think as a human being there's anyone who didn't get some sort of messaging, some sort of wounding, have some sort of trauma. Because remember, trauma just means what happens inside of us and how we see ourselves when something happens to us that causes pain that we're unable to deal with at the time. It doesn't have to be huge, major, terrible things. Okay? So there's that individually, and then there's what happens culturally. You can see entire cultures who generation after generation after generation, the wounds have been passed down. If we're not healing that individually, we're certainly not healing it culturally. And all you have to do is look around the world, look right in our own country, and see the strife between different cultures. When it's never been healed, it doesn't go away. In our own individual, unique lives, in our own bodies, and in our cultures. So that's why it's important to ask, are we passing down the wounding or are we passing down the wisdom? Do we have the courage to heal it individually so that we can heal it as a culture, so that we can heal it in our country, so that we can heal it globally? We can't heal anything if we're not willing to do it for our own individual selves, because the collective is made up of each individual person, right? And so I think it's also an important point to remember when you look at cultures or races that have been wounded for generations and no one ever really gave them the space to heal it, of course it's not healed. Just like in you may be 6 decades old, and if you never had the courage and no one ever gave you the space to deal with stuff that happened in your childhood, maybe you grew up in an alcoholic household and that's wounding that got passed down. Some people will become alcoholics themselves, other people will become overachievers and compensate and make everything okay for everybody because of the alcoholism. If that happened in your own life and you're still doing that and you still feel exhausted from that and you still feel sometimes alone and resentful and disconnected because of the effort that you're doing or whatever is the way that you chose to cope, then the same thing's happening in large groups of people, in families, in cultures, in races, in countries. So that's generational wounding. Passing down the wisdom is the access to stopping whatever your particular family wounds are so that the next generations coming don't continue them, so that they have access to a different way of being. It takes courage to be the one who says, I'm going to be the one who stops it in my family. I'm going to be the one that sends something different to my children, to their children, to their children. And the beautiful thing is you only have to heal yourself and start to be that transformed version of yourself, and everybody gets the benefit of that. There's a ripple effect there that you don't even know what's possible. That's what's really cool. And I love that when my clients say, I don't even know what happened. I've just been working on myself, and now my daughter who didn't talk to me is talking to me again. My son who's been struggling is now also getting freed up because I'm different. That's what's possible. Have a good day.